So we have come to the culminating session of day one of the Cyber Crimes Conclave. Um, we had Narendra Nath ji in the morning at the first session, and we're glad to have you back here for the last session as well. And along with him, we also have two very distinguished panelists, Kaarthik Sivakumar, Principal Engineer at Cisco, and Rinka leads the cyber security initiatives at iSPIRT, which you probably all know. Okay, so quick raise of hands. How many of you have heard of iSPIRT? Okay, very few raise of hands. How many of you have heard of UPI? Right, so there's a close association between iSPIRT and UPI. iSPIRT provided a lot of the engineering work for the development of UPI and a lot of other digital public goods that India today is very well acknowledged for. So glad to have all of you in this panel discussion. I'll start this with you, Rinka. If you can give the audience introduction to Cyber Maatrika, because probably most of them are hearing about this for the first time. So if you can introduce what Cyber Maatrika is and what's the problem statement of the initiative.
Hi everyone, I'm glad to be here. So Cyber Maatrika is a collaboration between iSPIRT and CySecK. And for all of you who've either created or answered RFP, so you take any technology RFP, especially related to, let's talk in terms of cybersecurity. The core of the RFP will be the technical specs, the technical and the service specs. So you take a router, for example. You will want to state the router will have X, Y, Z capabilities. Now, usually what happens is it is the creation of these specs that is the most crucial part. And so what we decided is we work with CySecK and look at creating an open source repository of specifications that anyone can use to create an RFP. So as a technology demonstrator, we created a panel and we created specs for SIEM. We put that up on GitHub. So that's github.com/cyber-maatrika. Those of you who want to take a look, please go ahead. And yeah, it's available for download. Now, I will take a minute or two to explain why we decided to do this and the importance of doing this actually. See, it seems like a very small thing actually. So you're cutting costs in terms of creating these specs, but the strategic implications of creating such a thing is tremendous actually. These specs were created by a team, a panel of extremely talented and experienced volunteers from various organizations, especially the customer organizations, consumer organizations, and system integrators. So first of all, because it is a team that spreads across multiple organizations, the specs are cutting edge, okay? And more importantly, since we have a panel, as we get feedback on the specs, we'll keep it updated and it stays cutting edge. So you have cutting edge specs out there, which is almost impossible to create. And these are continuously kept updated. Secondly, this panel now represents a pool of talent, of SMEs in that specific area, SIM in this specific area. We will expand it. It is crucial actually for the industry, for the country, to build a pool of talent. In fact, the key measurement of an advanced economy is the pool of talent. And it's for very good reasons why the US has the largest number of Nobel Prize winners. We, as we lead into the future, must build a pool in our specific area. And our area being cybersecurity, we must do that. And they need to be globally cutting edge. This helps us to do that. Second, this is, now if you get it right, you think about it, any RFP that requires technology can now use a similar model and host. We are talking of changing how RFPs are written in India. And every RFP that's put out now becomes completely cutting edge, right? And that will allow the products and systems that we deploy in India to be cutting edge. The third, from a really strategic perspective, as we talk about being a Vishwaguru, Vishwamitra, because these are open source, anybody in the world can download and use them. This establishes us as leaders in that specific field. And this is something that nobody else does. I mean, nobody, not even the US or anybody else for that matter. And fourth, actually, which is very important to us at iSPIRT, now these specs really serve as a list of problems that are available to startups. We hope the cybersecurity product startups now take these specs and create products around this. They have a list now of things to create, and once they create these specs, they have products that are now cutting edge, right? And that allows us to build an ecosystem of cybersecurity startups. So all of these together, we felt the initiative was strategic enough to put resources and focus into. And the implications being what they are, we plan to put our full weight behind it. Karthik.
Yeah, thanks, Rinka. Narendra Nath ji, if I can come to you next. So Rinka explained the need for having these specifications. It effectively lowers the barrier when it comes to identifying what is good. And specifications like this is not relevant only in cybersecurity, but can be relevant in any domain for that matter, right? Even from, if you take an example of laying of a road, we can do with specifications around, what is the right way to lay a road, whether it be a residential road or an arterial road or a highway, whatever kind of different types of roads, right? So, but coming to the cybersecurity context, and looking at the wider national context, what do you think, how do you think a program like Cyber Maatrika would help in the wider national context?
Thanks. In the morning, when I was in my discussion I was having with you, all of you here, one of the points that I raised about, the examples of, one was regarding the cybersecurity policy that was mandated, as per the license condition for the telecom service providers to have. And then we had a wide variety of, policy statements that came about. The requirement for a cybersecurity policy, the policy was, for fulfilling a purpose of ensuring security of those networks. But then there was a compliance mode in which they went around and they came up with a different set of cybersecurity policies. Then we came over and said that we should have some document which says that this should be the minimum requirement of a cybersecurity policy, where have a checklist of all the components that should go into it. The other point I'd made was regarding the National Cybersecurity Reference Framework, because we find that many organizations, whatever cybersecurity measures they put in place, depends on the capabilities and capacity of those individuals who are posted in those organizations, their understanding of what is cybersecurity. So you'll find there's a wide variety. Though, similarly placed enterprises ideally should be having similarly placed cybersecurity infrastructure because the requirements are similar. But that would not be the case because it depends on those people. So then we thought, why not come up with this reference framework, which would help organizations to look at it and decide, what are the measures that those organizations have to take to ensure cybersecurity of the enterprise. So the Cyber Maatrika part is also an initiative on similar lines. Even now you will find when the RFPs are created, I'm not talking about functional requirements of the thing, but the security principles of those things. The RFPs in many organizations, because the organizations per se does not have the competence to do it, you will find that it is OEM driven. There will be one dominant OEM who would be there, who will be driving the preparation of the specifications and that. And definitely when you look at the type of requirements which are there, they would put in one or two requirements which would be unique to that particular, the products that OEM generates. And that would, eliminate many, it would not be a fair competition that would be taking place. And that's not ideal. So, and a lot of time what happens is, when the RFP is floated and a set of requirements are put in place, there'll be some vendors who would have developed a cybersecurity product, but because they don't have access to that RFP at that particular point of time, they might not have those features. Given a amount of time, they might be able to incorporate those features. But at that point of time, those features are not there in the product. So they would not be qualified to, participate in that bidding process, or they'll get disqualified in the technical evaluation that happens. So that way, having, a spec list would help OEMs to say that target their product design to incorporate all the requirements of that particular spec. It would help the organizations to incorporate that, spec into their RFPs. So you'll have a competitive list of OEMs who would be able to participate in it, and definitely, improve the cybersecurity landscape in the country. So that way, I think this initiative is very good. The only issue here, I think, from what I see is that you're leading up to the question that you wanted to raise regarding the different types of roads which are there. And you talked about, having one for the router that you created. Now, there are different deployments of routers that take place. It could be a SME sort of deployment. It could be home router that you're talking of, at endpoint routers. Or it could be enterprise grade router that you're putting in place. And the requirements for each of them would be different. Not only that, the specification have a cost implication. So I think these are some things that as you go ahead down the road, you'll have to take into consideration, so that though you have the best in class that you talked about, but definitely some enterprises might not be able to afford the costs that are involved. So you might have to categorize, depending on the use cases, for the same category of product, different set of specifications, which then the enterprise would look at and decide, for me, this is the most suitable set that I will be incorporating in RFP. So that is where down the road, I think you'll have to look at that. As a first case, of course, it's a good initiative that's happened, but I think we'll have to work together with the, user community finally to say that what is their requirement, and then, fine grain it into the different, you can say, slots of that. But this is really, a step in the right direction. It will also help, Indian vendors to come up with products that will be there. In the morning, I was talking about proof of concept. So if we have these specs right at the beginning, they would have a developed product. So the proof of concept cycle also will be shorter. Otherwise, what happens is when you go into, and practical experience, what we have done with the BSNL case, is that it took a really long time for, to go through this iterative process of finding out deficiencies in the first cut of the product that was delivered, then saying that these are the deficiencies, going back, development activity. It's actually an iterative process for you to mature product to come about. But having this set of requirements would help people to do those things and be ready for, attacking the market. It's a very good initiative, and I think we are supportive of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Narendra Nath ji. Like you said, the specifications help the startups, the innovators identify what best in breed would look like and help them build their product against those specifications. You mentioned about OEM driven RFP documents. Another way I have seen RFP documents get documented is driven by analyst reports. And I think one and a half years back, Government of India came out with this circular that all government RFPs should not contain any reference or any mandate that only those who feature in a Gartner quadrant or those kind of analyst reports, only they are eligible to bid. The specification has been asked not to be placed. But the reason why this specifications, this requirement of Gartner report, Gartner quadrant comes in, is because people get that assurance that okay, whoever I end up with finally, is a decent quality solution who I can live with, right? So while the circular helps to some extent, it's more of a half measure, and hopefully building these model specifications will help address the challenge that the consuming entity faces when asked not to use analyst reports, right? So Karthik, coming to you now, from industry perspective, what is the value that you see from a program like Cyber Maatrika?
Sure.
Yeah. I'll come on this after you finish.
Okay, sure.
Sure. So I represent a security and network vendor, right? And we actually deal with a lot of RFPs that come to us from customers from a variety of backgrounds. And I see the value in doing something like this because if you are a small vendor, like you are an MSME, your focus is on your industry, right? Whatever it is that you're doing, you're probably building car parts, you're building, something that you're very good at doing. But you don't know what cybersecurity is needed for you, right? What kind of cybersecurity facilities are needed for you? And I think going out and hiring an analyst or figuring out what is the right thing, hiring an expert may just be too expensive for the vendor for the MSME to do, for instance. And so having something like this that is more standardized and says, okay, you are in this industry, and these are the minimum set of requirements that you can look for in a cybersecurity vendor, would help the MSMEs make that jump from having nothing at all to having a minimum basic set of cybersecurity products, right? And some principles that they could use and so on. In that respect, I think it does make a lot of sense. Now, a lot of large companies may want to go and build custom requirements because of just the kind of networks they have or the kind of solutions that they build and so on. But at least for very small industries, I think this is a very, very good jump from, like I said, from nothing at all to building the basic framework ready, right? I think there are a few things that we need to look at. Maybe they might have, when this gets built out further, we may have to look at sectoral divisions, probably, like, if you're a manufacturing industry, maybe these are the things that you need to have. If you are in education, maybe these are the minimum set of requirements you need to have and so on. As opposed to saying that this is the minimum set that just applies widely. That is very unlikely to happen. So we may have to start separating this out and saying, by industry, by sector, what makes sense. That is one thing. And the second thing is, I think this is a very good minimum set. There still needs to be some level of work to see, how many employees do you have and what kind of access do they have and so on, right? So even within the industry itself, there are a lot of other customizations that you may have to make. So I think Cyber Maatrika is a very good first step. You may still need to build on top of it. I think it's something that maybe as this goes on, as the Cyber Maatrika program goes further and further, all of those may get incorporated. I'm not sure what the exact plan is at this point, but it's something that can definitely get incorporated into this as it goes on, right? One challenge I would definitely point out is that a lot of this, if it is built. So one of the things that you have from an industry perspective is that you have a skin in the game, right? You have people come in and say, this is a company that I'm running. I want this to be protected, and so I'm going to figure out what exactly I need. Now, when you have a community come together and build this, we also need to make sure that the community is around, right? I mean, a lot of people if you look at a community, they're usually coming in, they work for some time, they may move out and so on. How do we manage a community like that? How do we maintain the continuity of the Cyber Maatrika program going forward? As new technologies come in, as new attacks come in, who is going to help you out, keep this continuity and keep building upon these programs? I think that is something that just needs to be worked out. It's not impossible, of course. It's a challenge, but that is something that needs to be addressed. So. Overall, I think it's I think Cyber Maatrika is a very good first step, right? And I think as Sri Narendra Nath was saying, for Indian companies, this is a very good step, right? Because here's a minimum set that if you match this set, you can get a POC, you can start to make the inroads into getting your product into the industry. So.
Yep.
Let Narendra Nath go before I comment on the community. Yours, please.
Oh, yeah.
You wanted to say something?
Yeah. One, of course, is something that when he was talking about is, it will be a good capacity building tool itself, or even for people from colleges and all, to look at those documentation that we experts creating those documentation. We get a capacity building tool for people to understand what are the cybersecurity requirements. That's one good part. But the point I wanted to raise at that was, one thing about the bigger companies is, there's a certain assurance that you get that regarding the very good practices within those organizations. They are very mature organizations, internal processes are very robust, and you get a certain level of assurance that the product that comes out is a very good product. So definitely, one of the bigger companies, when you're getting a product, you normally do not go in for a testing to see that, or to verify all the claims that are made about the product. But when you have a smaller company coming with the same set of product and claims, then you say that, I want to get it tested. So that, though we might have this Cyber Maatrika and all of that in companies, I think this testing and assurance framework is something that also might have to be developed in parallel within the country to see that, products coming from small companies, they comply to these things. But definitely from the the agency procuring, they might also want to say, how do I verify the claims that are being made? So that might be a challenge that also will require to be looked into. That is one thing that I thought.
Yep.
So I'll just comment on the community part actually. That's actually a superpower over here because it does a couple of things. Number one, it builds SMEs, and to me building SMEs is crucial actually. We don't have, you take any specific area, so building global SMEs is something that we must do actually. And that is a lack, which is why we tend to blindly trust. Now, in terms of people coming and going, that happens with volunteers. But if the panel is held together and you have a controlled way where people go and people come and the learning is held within the panel, then having people come and go is not such a major issue. In fact, that's a good thing because the guys going out will go with that knowledge and spread it out. And the guys coming in will upgrade themselves. So that's one part. And the second part is because it is open, it establishes that trust that, okay, this is open and we know that the panel is widely distributed. So it cannot be hijacked by any one vendor. See, because there is a lot of checks and balances there. And yes, people will come and say that, hey, I've got this specific feature that's brilliant. And one can always document it saying that this is a new upcoming feature, nice to have, right? And so from that perspective, all of those perspectives, having it open, including allowing people to say that, look, I have this issue with your specs. Do you want to add to it or do you want to comment on it? Do you want to address it? So multiple perspectives come in and all of them strengthen the specifications actually. So to my mind, having an open community actually is a superpower in this particular case. And the other major advantage that we get is, now let's say the ecosystem say I want to do 10 specs in parallel. We can actually do it because the number of people are available out there. All we have to do is to program manage them to make it happen in parallel. So we can actually scale this out both horizontally and vertically pretty fast.
Just one point. But I think still it would be a challenge.
Yes.
Over a period of time, you see, it's like this. Let's say you are there now and you were very impartial and, driving it to see that. But, over a period of time when certain vendors start looking at it and seeing that this is something that's going to be a base for, most of the procurement action, like we observe in standardization bodies. Standardization bodies are also an open sort of a thing, where people come and anybody can contribute. But still, you will find there's a push and pull from OEMs to see that the technologies that they've developed, the IP that they've generated out of their organizations become part of the standard so that it becomes a standard essential patent that they can generate out of it. So you will find there's a push to see that the technology they develop becomes part of the standard.
Yes, I agree.
So
yes.
something similar will start occurring in this initiative also. And I don't know, I'm not able to see how it's going to pan out, but it will be a challenge to see that how do you prevent, the unique features that a particular company has got doesn't become part of the spec. So are you going to build a consensus before you publish it? How do you finally determine this is now the right time for me to publish it as something?
Good point. Let me kind of try to answer that in the sense, see, the process is as follows. You take the specs, look at it and file a defect on GitHub. You can file an issue on GitHub. And the panel, which is separated from the people who are filing defects, would look at it and decide whether to add it. So it is this panel of 6-7 people who are not connected at all to the people who filed the defect. So it is up to them. If they feel, okay, now this is a feature that has a huge, huge value to the community, then you might want to add that feature saying that this is related to a specific company and it is up to you to add it in your RFP or don't add it. That's one way of going. Another way of going is saying, genericizing that feature and saying that, okay, we need this capability. So for example, not a very good example, but in networking, when software-defined networks came up, it was developed by one company, but the industry felt software-defined networks were very important. So it was actually, now that's a feature like almost everybody's offering in their own way. So new features would be recognized and addressed, I'm using the word addressed deliberately, appropriately in the specs. Because the specs are now not handled by, I mean, the specific vendor who's given that is not involved in updating it. There's a different set of people doing it. So that I think, but there will be pulls and pressures. And that has happened in ITF. We've seen that happen in ITF very well, actually. So absolutely, yes, we need to consider that.
So I'll come back to you on how each one of you think we can Cyber Maatrika program should the initiative should evolve. But before that, I just want to see if does anyone have any questions? Is there any questions from the audience?
Anybody for questions here? Yeah.
Yeah, my name is Vinay, and just curious to understand, where do you source the specifications from? What is your baseline? Because if you take even one specific firewall, right, there could be multiple vendors offering differentiated features and specifications. What becomes your baseline?
Right. So let me answer that. I'll give you the example of what we've done actually, SIEM. So I wrote a very basic SIEM specs, I wrote it. And we pulled together a panel of 6 people, like I said, very experienced people, who looked at that and said that, okay, we want to add the following additional specs. So what I added 10 lines grew eventually into something like 60 or 70 lines of specs. Okay, both service spec, technical specs and service specs. So service specs are like SLAs and stuff like that. So that now is the baseline that 6 diverse experience engineers have put out. Okay, and so now that becomes a starting baseline. And we put it out there, and we've started getting comments, hey, you guys missed out X, Y. So the panel will meet on a regular basis and look at it and accept the comments or reject the comments and update the specs. So while the specs is put out the first time, it is getting updated.
But would it not be a mix and match of different products that are out there?
No,
not find
not really. We are not looking at mix and matching of products. These contributors are all from system integrators and consumers. So they look at what they need. Finally, a specification is what you need. We do not specify a feature that a particular product has. We specify a feature that is needed by a consumer.
So if I may answer that, I think you had a specific question around the firewall. If I am not wrong about how this is done, I think it's being done from first principles, in the sense that what does a firewall need, right? And
exactly,
yes. It's been done as opposed to picking any baseline or any specific product. Instead, I think the way the requirements are being put together is saying what does a firewall need, and then starting from first principles is how I understood the way it's operating.
Exactly right. It is from first principles. That's the best way to put it.
Any other questions,
Any other
please?
question? We probably have time for one more question before I go back to the panelists.
I think we are good to go.
Okay, so coming back to the panelists then, so Rinka, you mentioned about the SIEM specifications, what next? What, from your perspective, are the next steps for the Cyber Maatrika program?
So a couple of things actually. One is it's out there. Anybody can download and take a look at it. So if you're a startup and you want to do something in SIEM, download it, and you might want to validate the specs of the products you have. If you are a vendor wanting to create a RFP, please use that as a starting point. If you're not even, I mean, you don't want to deploy it, but you might want to download it and take a look at your existing installations and see if your existing installations match these specs. If there's something you can take away from this, please, we'd be happy. And if you think there's something missing, please file a comment saying that, hey, I think these are things you can add into your specs. And the panel meet at regular intervals and look at merging it appropriately. So we now need community contribution and participation in terms of, first, using these SIM specs, and I will use the word use appropriately. Please use them, take a look at it and comment. We are happy to take comments, okay? The second step beyond that is we now want from the community, okay, what are the next set of specs you need? Tell us what the specs are, and would you like to participate in this? Would you like to propose some of your SMEs? Check with your SMEs if they want to participate. There is significant value for you because if you're participating in this, your SMEs work with others and they build significant knowledge which would be very useful to you going forward, assuming you're a SI or a consumer. So these are the things that we want to take this next actually. And it doesn't matter whether you are the government or you are private or what, an MSME can use this actually.
Sure, yeah. Thanks, Rinka. Karthik, so you bring in the SME perspective, right, that Rinka was mentioning about. So from an SME perspective, from an industry perspective, you know, what you think the program can do, should do in terms of going forward?
So I think from an industry perspective, I would say the key thing is to see where the industry already is. I mean, again, you know, as Rinka was mentioning, a lot of this is coming from first principles. But there's been a lot of products that have been around for a while, and maybe you don't want to look at the product or a specific company and so on. But I think the functionality that exists today has been built over many years, right? And I think the question is, how do we get these specifications running, up and running very quickly in a lot of different areas. So let's say, rather than looking at it from just more product perspective, maybe it's time to look at it from what are you trying to do perspective. Let's say you want to prevent ransomware, right? And so what are the specifications that would help you prevent ransomware, right? What are the specifications that will help you prevent or, protect you from a phishing email? Let's say somebody does click on a phishing email. What is it that, you need to do in order to protect yourself? Right? I think that going back and starting from first principles for every product that exists in the industry is probably replicating what's already in the industry, right? And it seems to me like I would just probably go out and buy what's in the industry. I mean, just coming from the industry myself, right? But if you were to build something that's for SMEs, for MSMEs, for people who are not familiar with the technology, and we don't want them going out and thinking, am I going to buy a firewall? Am I going to buy this? Or am I going to... Instead, I just want to be able to say, I use credit cards. I store credit card data as part of my company's work. What do I need to protect that information? Right? I collect user information. What do I need? What specifications do I need to protect that information? Right? I think that perspective in bringing these RFP requirements is probably the right way to do now that we're starting at this point. I mean, if we were doing this 15, 20 years ago, I would say, yeah, let's go figure out what a firewall does and build from there. There are so many firewalls already, right? Why go back and start from there, right? So I think we need to start at this point where we say we need an integrated solution. What is the requirements that a small business should look at in protecting themselves from ransomware, from data breaches, from whatever the specific kinds of attacks that are happening. And I think building a specification around that and then having your vendor come in and say, you know what, I can protect you for these different scenarios. I think that probably is the right way to go. And I think that Cyber Maatrika, should really go in that direction, looking at it from a solutions perspective, as opposed to the product perspective. Or what are you preventing, right? I think that's really should be the goal.
Sure. So Narendra Nath ji, last word to you. So from from a government perspective, national perspective, what you think the program should be doing next?
No, yeah, I'll answer that also, but I'll take off from where, it's a very good one point that you raised. It's not a trivial problem to solve, in the sense that you're talking in terms of a new product design, basically. And then, it's like you're doing a new product design for multiple of industries for them to, look at it and then, come up with their own products for that, which is currently doesn't exist. Good thing to have, But as I said again, I repeat myself, and that's not a trivial problem to solve. I don't know how would go about it. I mean, there'd be a considerable body of expertise that will have to be put into this exercise for doing it. Getting expertise for individual like firewall or SIEM or something is might be quite easy because people understand what is a firewall and people understand what is SIEM. But this is something what I think on this forum itself we will not be able to solve this problem. It's a separate discussion. It should happen to see that. Of course, this seems to be the right way to go ahead. If we can do that, it will be very good. And then what happens is you would come up with a specific set of solutions which would be for different scale of organizations. You would actually have different scale of organizations for which you'd be targeting. Oh, good. I was just thinking loud in that. So yeah, from the government perspective, what we understand is it's like this. There is an evolution that's happening, and then it's a work in progress that happens. We are trying to solve problems and trying to see, get the expertise into the enterprises to solve. Sorry, for them to put the cybersecurity solutions in place. And I again repeat myself, this is certain things that we want the enterprises to take measures on. And all these exercises are to help them to do these activities. So that way, I think we should have a much more in-depth, and then it will be an iterative process and to see how successful it is. Like the same you talked about. One is, you go forward further and say that, there are certain more other products that I want to work on, or I come up with trying to work on a solution. But now that you have got the same in place, how do you make it that enterprises would use this now? You already have it. How many enterprises have come forward and said, I'm going to use this in my next RFP? That roadmap has to be set out now. Otherwise, it will be an exercise in futility. They just keep on, busy generating all of that. People not acceptability of that would also be an important component. Maybe private enterprises could look at it and then they would take initiative. How do you get the government to say adopt it? So that is something I think we'll have to really think about, and then tell that okay, this is a recognized endeavor. There is following a set process, and this is something that can be trusted upon to generate an vendor neutral, requirement based specification which will address the problem, and that's why you can go ahead with that. And that is something that has to come out. If that doesn't come out, then people will not adopt it. I think we'll work together on this. Thank you.
Sure, yeah. So trust is the key. I think that's the key message from this discussion. Thank you so much to the panelists. It was my pleasure. In having a stellar panel like this makes the job of a moderator very easy. So thanks once again, and thanks to the audience for being part of this panel discussion and for being part of the program the whole day. Thank you.